It was a sunny afternoon in the small town of Greenfield, the kind of day that felt like summer could stretch on forever. The neighborhood buzzed with the laughter of children playing, the scent of freshly mowed lawns drifting through the air. On a quiet corner of Maple Street, a young girl named Alana sat behind her lemonade stand, a simple wooden table decorated with a handwritten sign that read, "Fresh lemonade, 50 cents." Her braids swayed in the breeze as she poured a cup of lemonade for a smiling customer, her face glowing with the joy of a young entrepreneur chasing her dreams. Alana, only 12 years old, was the heart of the community. Her lemonade stand wasn't just about making money. It was about bringing people together. Neighbors stopped by to chat. Children came for a cold drink after playing tag, and even a local mailman never missed a chance to grab a cup. Alana's energy was infectious, and her determination was inspiring. She had big dreams of saving up for a special summer camp she'd been talking about for months, and everyone in the neighborhood was rooting for her. But not everyone saw the innocence in her efforts. Across town, a man sat in his office, frowning at a growing stack of paperwork. Police Chief Bradley Porter, a towering figure with a reputation for being strict and unyielding, prided himself on running a by-the-book operation. To some, he was a symbol of law and order. To others, he was a man who saw the world in black and white, incapable of empathy or understanding the shades of gray that made life human. Chief Porter was having a rough day. Reports of minor infractions piled up on his desk, and in his mind, the town was spiraling into chaos. He believed rules were rules, no exceptions. And when he overheard a complaint about an unlicensed business operating on Maple Street, his frustration boiled over. Without asking questions, without considering the context, he grabbed his hat and stormed out of the station. For him, it was just another box to check, another problem to solve. Meanwhile, Alana was wrapping up her day, the jar on her table jingling with coins and the occasional dollar bill. She was about to close up shop when the unmistakable sound of a police car pulling up caught her attention. The shiny black and white vehicle parked right in front of her stand, its lights off, but its presence intimidating. The door swung open, and out stepped Chief Porter, his stern face shadowed by his hat. Alana froze, her heart racing. She'd never been in trouble before. She glanced around, hoping someone might step in, but the street was quiet now. Chief Porter approached her stand, his boots crunching against the pavement. He loomed over the small table, his cold gaze taking in the jars of lemonade, the stack of cups, and the little sign that had brought so much joy to her neighbors. "Is this your stand?" he asked, his voice sharp and devoid of warmth. Alana nodded, clutching the jar of coins protectively. "Yes, sir. I'm just selling lemonade to save up for camp." "That's not how it works," he replied, shaking his head. "You need a permit to sell anything in this town. Didn't your parents teach you that?" Tears welled up in Alana's eyes as she tried to explain, but Chief Porter wasn't interested in hearing her out. He reached for the jar, declaring it evidence of an unlicensed operation. Before she knew it, he was placing her in the back seat of his police car, her dreams and her dignity crushed in an instant. What Chief Porter didn't realize, though, was that Alana wasn't just any kid. Her father, a man he had never met, was someone who wouldn't take this lightly. Someone powerful, influential, and deeply protective of his daughter. And when he found out what had happened, the entire town of Greenfield was about to be shaken to its core. As the police car drove off, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows over Maple Street. The lemonade stand stood empty, a silent testament to a young girl's crushed spirit. But this was far from the end of the story. In fact, it was only the beginning. The ride to the station felt like an eternity for Alana. She sat in the back seat, her small hands clenched into fists as she tried to hold back tears. She was scared, confused, and, more than anything, embarrassed. How could this be happening? Just a few hours ago, she had been laughing with her friends, counting her earnings, and dreaming about the camp that meant so much to her. Now, here she was, sitting in the back of a police car, treated like a criminal. Chief Porter drove silently, his jaw tight and his eyes fixed on the road. He didn't see a 12-year-old girl with dreams. He saw someone breaking the rules. To him, it didn't matter that it was just lemonade. Rules were rules, and a law was the law. But something about her silence made him glance in the rearview mirror. For a split second, he thought he saw his own daughter's face reflected back at him. His chest tightened, but he quickly shook it off. This wasn't about feelings. This was about order. At the station, the mood was tense. Officers exchanged glances as Chief Porter walked in with Alana. Most of them knew her. After all, it was a small town. They'd seen her playing in the park, riding her bike, or helping her mom carry groceries. Seeing her like this, with her head bowed and her shoulders slumped, felt wrong. But no one dared to question the chief. He was a man of rules, and challenging him often came at a price. He led Alana to a small office and motioned for her to sit in one of the chairs. She hesitated, her feet barely moving, before finally sinking into the seat. The room felt cold, sterile, and unwelcoming. The chief sat across from her, flipping open a notebook and scribbling something down. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper filled the silence, making it almost unbearable. "What's your full name?" he asked without looking up. "Alana James," she replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "And your parents? What are their names?" "My mom is Vanessa James," she said, her tone trembling. "My dad, he's not around a lot." Chief Porter raised an eyebrow at her hesitation, but didn't press further. He leaned back in his chair, tapping the pen against the notebook. "Do you understand why you're here, Alana?" She nodded, though she didn't fully understand. "Because I didn't have a permit," she said quietly. "That's right," he said. "Selling lemonade without a permit is against town regulations. You can't just set up a stand and do whatever you want. That's not how things work." "But I wasn't hurting anyone," Alana said, her voice breaking. "I just wanted to save money for camp." The chief sighed, clearly irritated. He didn't have time for emotional arguments. "Intentions don't matter, Alana. The law is the law." As he spoke, the door to the office opened, and Officer Daniels, one of the younger members of the force, peeked inside. He looked uncomfortable, almost apologetic, as he cleared his throat. "A chief? Can I have a word with you?" Chief Porter frowned, but got up, leaving Alana alone in the room. Outside, Daniels lowered his voice, glancing back toward the door. "Chief, with all due respect, this feels off. She's just a kid. Maybe we should call her mom and handle this differently." Porter crossed his arms, his expression hardening. "Daniels, this isn't about feelings. She broke the rules, and she needs to understand there are consequences." "I get that," Daniels said, choosing his words carefully. "But this is Alana James. You know, her mom's a big part of the community. And her dad." He hesitated, his voice trailing off. "You might want to think this through." Porter's eyes narrowed. "Her dad? What about him?" Daniels glanced down the hallway, making sure no one else was listening. "You don't know who he is, do you?" The chief shook his head, clearly impatient. "I don't care who he is." "You might," Daniels said quietly. "Her dad's Marcus James." At the sound of the name, something shifted in Chief Porter's demeanor. Marcus James wasn't just anyone. He was a high-profile attorney known for taking on civil rights cases and winning. He'd been on national news more than once, standing up to corporations, institutions, and even law enforcement when he felt justice wasn't being served. If anyone could turn a situation like this into a very public spectacle, it was Marcus James. Chief Porter's mind raced. He hadn't put the pieces together because Marcus was rarely in town. His work often took him to big cities, and he wasn't seen around Greenfield much. But now, knowing the connection, the weight of his actions started to settle on his shoulders. Still, he wasn't about to back down. If anything, his pride doubled down on the decision he'd made. Rules were rules, and he wouldn't be intimidated. Not by Marcus James, not by anyone. Back in the office, Alana sat quietly, her hands gripping the edge of the chair. She thought about her mom, who would be home from work soon and probably panicking when she found out what had happened. And she thought about her dad. Even though he wasn't around much, she knew he cared about her deeply. He'd always told her to stand up for herself, to believe in her worth, and to never let anyone make her feel small. But right now, she felt very small. Chief Porter re-entered the room, his expression unreadable. He sat down across from Alana again, tapping his pen on the desk. "We've contacted your mom. She's on her way to pick you up." Alana felt a flicker of relief, but it was quickly overshadowed by the sinking feeling that this wasn't over. She didn't know what the chief would tell her mom or how her dad might react when he found out. All she knew was that something about this day had changed her. She wasn't sure how, but she felt it deep in her chest. Across town, Vanessa James was just pulling into the driveway when her phone rang. Seeing the caller ID, her stomach dropped. She answered quickly, her voice laced with concern. "This is Vanessa." The voice on the other end explained the situation, and with every word, Vanessa's anxiety turned to anger. "You arrested my daughter? For selling lemonade? Are you serious?" By the time she hung up, her hands were shaking. She didn't waste a second before dialing another number. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Vanessa? Everything okay?" "No, Marcus," she said, her voice firm but controlled. "It's not okay. It's about Alana. She needs you." Marcus didn't hesitate. "What happened?" Vanessa took a deep breath, her emotions spilling out as she explained everything. By the time she finished, Marcus was silent for a moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but carried an edge of determination. "I'll be there soon." Back at the station, Chief Porter tried to shake off the growing unease in his chest. He had no idea what was coming, but deep down, he couldn't ignore the feeling that this decision was going to come back to haunt him. As Alana sat quietly in that cold room, her mom speeding toward the station and her dad making plans of his own, the town of Greenfield had no idea that this small, seemingly insignificant moment was about to spark something much bigger, something no one would see coming. At the police station, Alana sat in silence, her mind racing with questions and fears. Her hands fidgeted in her lap, but no amount of squeezing or twisting could calm the knot in her stomach. She had never been in trouble before, never even thought of herself as someone who could get in trouble. The chief's harsh words and the cold room around her made her feel small, like the world had suddenly turned against her for reasons she couldn't understand. Every passing second felt heavier than the last, and she couldn't shake the thought of her mom's reaction or her dad's. Vanessa James had always been a pillar of strength. As a single mom raising Alana, she had worked tirelessly to give her daughter everything she needed. She taught Alana the value of hard work, kindness, and standing up for what's right. But when Vanessa stepped into that station, her calm exterior cracked. Seeing her daughter sitting in that chair, her eyes puffy from holding back tears, made something deep inside her boil. Chief Porter greeted Vanessa with the same stern expression he wore for everyone, but she wasn't intimidated. "Mrs. James, thank you for coming," he started, as if he were doing her a favor. "We needed to address your daughter's violation." "Violation?" Vanessa cut him off, her voice sharp but steady. "Selling lemonade isn't a violation. She's a child, not a criminal." Porter held his ground. "Rules are rules, Mrs. James. She didn't have a permit. That's the law." Vanessa's glare could have cut through steel. "And you couldn't have handled this with a conversation? You had to arrest her? Put her in a squad car and drag her down here like she's some kind of felon?" "I followed protocol," Porter replied, though his voice faltered ever so slightly. "I treat everyone equally." Vanessa leaned in closer, her tone low but firm. "That's where you're wrong. Treating everyone equally isn't the same as treating everyone fairly." Porter said nothing, but his grip on the edge of the desk tightened. He was used to criticism, it came with a badge. But something about Vanessa's presence made him uneasy. She wasn't just angry. She was resolute, and he could sense that this wasn't the end of the conversation. Meanwhile, Marcus James was already on his way to Greenfield. He had dropped everything as soon as Vanessa called, his focus narrowing to one singular goal: protecting his daughter. He hadn't been as present in Alana's day-to-day life as he wanted to be, but that didn't mean he loved her any less. And now, hearing that she had been humiliated and treated unjustly, he felt a fire building inside him. He wasn't just a father heading to his daughter's side. He was a man who had spent his entire career fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves. Back at the station, Alana clung to her mom's side as Vanessa demanded an apology from Chief Porter. You had no right to traumatize her like this, Vanessa said, her voice rising. You owe her an explanation. You owe her an apology. Porter stiffened. I don't apologize for enforcing the law. Vanessa opened her mouth to argue, but before she could respond, the door to the station swung open. Marcus walked in, his commanding presence filling the room. He was tall, sharp-dressed, and carried himself with a calm confidence that turned heads. Even the officers who weren't familiar with him could sense he was someone important. His eyes immediately found Alana, and his expression softened as he crossed the room to kneel in front of her. "Hey, sweetheart," he said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" Alana nodded, but the tears she had been holding back spilled over. She threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. Marcus held her tightly, his jaw clenched as he fought to keep his own emotions in check. When he finally stood, his demeanor shifted. He turned to Chief Porter, his calm exterior now icy. "Chief Porter, I'm Marcus James," he said, extending a hand. Porter hesitated before shaking it. "I know who you are." "Good," Marcus replied, his tone cool. "Then you know I take issues like this very seriously. You arrested my daughter for selling lemonade. You didn't just enforce a rule. You embarrassed her, frightened her, and made her feel like she did something wrong when all she was trying to do was make an honest effort to save for her dreams." Porter's face hardened. "As I've explained, she didn't have a permit. The law applies to everyone." Marcus tilted his head, studying the chief with a piercing gaze. "You think you're teaching her a lesson about rules. But let me ask you this. What lesson are you teaching her about fairness? About compassion? About what it means to serve the community instead of punishing it?" The room went silent. Even Vanessa, who had been ready to jump back in, paused to let Marcus's words sink in. Alana looked up at her dad, her tears drying as she watched him stand up for her. She'd always admired how he could stay calm under pressure, how he could use his words to make people listen. And now, seeing him go toe-to-toe with the chief, she felt something shift inside her, like a spark of hope. Porter's face remained stoic, but inside his thoughts were spinning. He had expected Vanessa to be angry, but Marcus's presence changed everything. This wasn't just a disgruntled parent complaining about their kid being reprimanded. This was something bigger, and Porter wasn't sure how to handle it. Still, his pride wouldn't let him back down. "Mr. James," Porter said evenly, "I appreciate your perspective, but my responsibility is to enforce the law. I can't make exceptions." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "And your responsibility to the people you serve? Where does that fit in?" Before Porter could respond, another officer approached, whispering something in his ear. Whatever was said made the chief's expression shift ever so slightly, but he quickly dismissed the officer with a nod. He turned back to Marcus, Vanessa, and Alana. "I think we've said enough for today," he said curtly. "Mrs. James, Mr. James, you're free to take your daughter home." Vanessa narrowed her eyes. "This isn't over." Marcus nodded in agreement, his gaze steady. Not by a long shot. As the family left the station, Alana walked between her parents, holding both their hands. The sun had set, and the streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement. Alana felt a mix of emotions, relief to be free, but also a lingering sadness she couldn't quite shake. She glanced up at her dad, her voice small but steady. "Dad, are you mad at me?" Marcus stopped walking and crouched down so he was eye level with her. "No, sweetheart, I'm not mad at you. You didn't do anything wrong. You were brave, and I'm proud of you." Alana nodded, her lips trembling as she fought back more tears. Vanessa placed a hand on her back, her voice soft. "We're going to fix this, Alana. I promise." As they continued toward the car, Marcus's mind was already working. He wasn't just thinking about his daughter. He was thinking about all the kids in this town who might face similar treatment, about the deeper issues this incident revealed. And he knew one thing for certain. This fight wasn't just about a lemonade stand. It was about justice, about fairness, and about standing up for what's right. But as the night settled over Greenfield, Chief Porter sat in his office, staring at the empty desk in front of him. The whisper from his officer still echoed in his mind, making him feel uneasy. He didn't know what the James family had planned, but he could feel the storm brewing. and he wasn't sure if he was ready for it. The ride home was quiet, but the air was heavy with unspoken thoughts. Alana sat in the back seat, staring out the window as the streets of Greenfield blurred past. Her dad was driving, his hands gripping the wheel just a little too tightly, while her mom sat beside him, her arms crossed and her jaw set. Alana could feel the tension between them, though neither had said much since they left the station. She wanted to ask what was going to happen next, but something about the way her dad's eyes flicked between the road and the rearview mirror made her hesitate. He looked calm on the outside, but she could tell he was deep in thought. When they pulled into the driveway, Marcus turned off the car, but didn't get out right away. He turned to face Alana, his expression softening as he spoke. "You okay, sweetheart?" Alana nodded, but didn't meet his eyes. "I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean to cause all this trouble." Her words broke something in him. Marcus reached back, resting a hand on her knee. "This isn't your fault, Alana. None of it. You hear me? You were just trying to do something good, and you shouldn't feel bad about that." Vanessa turned to look at her daughter, her face a mix of anger and sadness. "Your dad's right. You didn't do anything wrong. If anyone should be apologizing, it's Chief Porter." Alana finally looked up, her eyes searching her dad's face. "Are you going to do something about it?" Marcus exchanged a glance with Vanessa before answering. "I am. But it's not just about today, Alana. What happened to you isn't okay, and it's not okay for anyone else in this town either. We're going to make sure this kind of thing doesn't happen again." Alana didn't fully understand what he meant, but there was something reassuring in the way he said it. She nodded, a small flicker of hope returning to her chest. That night, while Alana went to bed, Marcus and Vanessa stayed up, their voices low but firm as they discussed the next steps. Vanessa paced the living room, her arms crossed tightly, while Marcus sat at the kitchen table, his laptop open in front of him. "Do you think this will work?" Vanessa asked, her voice laced with doubt. "It has to," Marcus replied, not looking up from his screen. "This isn't just about Alana anymore. It's about holding people like Porter accountable. He thinks he can get away with this because no one's challenged him before." Vanessa sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I just don't want this to blow back on Alana. She's already been through enough." Marcus closed the laptop and looked at her, his gaze steady. "I'll protect her. You know I will. But we can't stay quiet about this. If we do, he'll just keep doing it to other kids, to other families. And next time, it might be worse." Vanessa didn't respond right away, but she knew he was right. She sat down beside him, resting her head in her hands. "I just hate that it had to come to this." Marcus reached for her hand, giving it a squeeze. "Me too, but we're going to make this right." The next day, Marcus started making calls. He reached out to colleagues, journalists, and community leaders, sharing Alana's story and gathering support. Within hours, news of what had happened began to spread. Social media lit up with posts about the incident, with people expressing outrage over how a young girl had been treated for something as innocent as selling lemonade. Parents from all over Greenfield shared similar stories of feeling targeted by overly strict or unfair enforcement. It wasn't long before the story caught the attention of local news outlets, and soon, reporters were knocking on the James family's door. At first, Vanessa hesitated to let them in. She didn't want Alana to be overwhelmed by the attention. But Marcus convinced her that shining a light on what had happened was the only way to bring about change. Alana, though nervous, agreed to speak with a reporter. Sitting in their living room, she told her story, her voice shaking at first but growing stronger as she spoke. "I just wanted to go to camp," she said, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I didn't think selling lemonade was wrong. I didn't think it would make me a bad person." The reporter nodded, encouraging her to continue. "How did it feel when the police came?" Alana hesitated, glancing at her parents for reassurance. "It felt scary, like I was in trouble for something I didn't even know was wrong. I didn't know what to say. I just wanted to go home." Her words resonated with viewers, sparking a wave of outrage and empathy. People began organizing online, calling for accountability and demanding answers from Chief Porter. The hashtag Justice for Alana started trending, and what had begun as a small-town incident quickly gained national attention. At the police station, Chief Porter was feeling the pressure. His phone rang constantly, with calls from reporters, angry citizens, and even members of the town council. He tried to brush it off, telling himself that it would all blow over. But deep down, he knew this was different. This wasn't just a few disgruntled parents complaining about rules. This was a full-blown crisis, and his name was at the center of it. His officers were uneasy, too. Many of them had grown up in Greenfield and knew the James family personally. They didn't like how Alana had been treated, but questioning the chief wasn't something they dared to do. Now, with the spotlight shining brightly on their department, the tension within the station was palpable. As the days passed, the James family received both support and backlash. While many rallied behind them, some in the community criticized them for blowing things out of proportion or stirring up trouble. Alana overheard snippets of conversations at school and saw the way some kids looked at her differently. It hurt, but she held her head high, remembering her dad's words, "You didn't do anything wrong." The town itself seemed to be at a tipping point. For years, Greenfield had prided itself on being a quiet, close-knit community. But now, old grievances and hidden tensions were bubbling to the surface. People began sharing stories of feeling mistreated or ignored by local authorities. Community meetings grew heated as residents demanded transparency and change. The once peaceful town was no longer so quiet. For Marcus, this was exactly what he had hoped for. The more people spoke out, the more momentum the movement gained. But he knew the fight was far from over. Chief Porter wasn't going to back down easily, and there were still powerful forces in town trying to keep things the way they were. The real test came when the town council announced a public hearing to address the growing controversy. It would be an opportunity for the community to voice their concerns and for Chief Porter to defend his actions. Marcus prepared tirelessly, gathering evidence, testimonies, and legal arguments. He knew this was his chance to not only clear his daughter's name, but also challenge the systems that allowed people like Porter to wield their authority unchecked. The night of the hearing, the town hall was packed. People from all walks of life filled the seats, their faces a mix of anger, hope, and determination. Alana sat between her parents, clutching her mom's hand as they waited for the meeting to begin. The tension in the room was palpable, and everyone seemed to be holding their breath, waiting to see what would unfold. As the meeting was called to order, Marcus stood, ready to speak. The eyes of the entire town and beyond were on him. And as he approached the podium, Alana felt a surge of pride. No matter what happened next, she knew her dad was fighting for her, for their family, and for something bigger than all of them. Marcus took a deep breath as he stood at the podium, the room so quiet you could hear the faint hum of the overhead lights. He scanned the audience, his eyes landing on Alana for just a moment. Her presence reminded him why he was there, why he couldn't let fear or intimidation stop him. This wasn't just about one bad decision by Chief Porter. It was about a system that had allowed people in positions of power to act without accountability for far too long. "Good evening," Marcus began, his voice steady but commanding. "I'm Marcus James, and I'm here tonight not just as a father, but as a member of this community. A community that deserves better than what it's been given." He went on to recount Alana's story, his words painting a vivid picture of the day she was arrested. He spoke about the humiliation she had endured, the fear in her eyes when he had seen her at the station. But then he widened the lens, connecting her experience to the broader pattern of unfair treatment that many in Greenfield had faced. He shared testimonies from other parents who had come forward, their voices trembling as they described similar encounters with local authorities. By the time he finished, the room was buzzing with a mixture of anger and agreement. People were nodding, whispering to one another, and glancing toward Chief Porter, who sat stiffly at the back of the room. The chief, however, was prepared. As soon as Marcus stepped down, Porter rose from his seat and made his way to the front of the room, his posture rigid and his jaw tight. His expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, defensiveness, perhaps, or maybe fear. He adjusted the microphone and cleared his throat before addressing the crowd. "Let me start by saying I respect Mr. James and his concerns," Porter began, his voice measured. "But what happened with his daughter was not personal. It was simply the enforcement of a municipal code that exists to maintain order and fairness in our town. His words were carefully chosen, but they rang hollow. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, and a few people murmured under their breath. Porter continued, his tone growing firmer as he attempted to justify his actions. He talked about the importance of rules and the need for consistency, framing the incident as a matter of public safety rather than overreach. But just as it seemed he might sway the room, a voice called out from the back, "Then why don't you enforce those rules on everyone?" The crowd turned to see who had spoken, and a man stood, his face flushed with emotion. "My son set up a lemonade stand last summer, and no one said a word. But he doesn't look like Alana, does he?" The tension in the room exploded. More voices joined in, some shouting in agreement, others demanding answers. Porter's composure began to crack as he struggled to maintain control of the room. He held up his hands, trying to speak over the noise, but it was no use. The meeting had turned into chaos. Just when it seemed like things couldn't escalate further, a young officer stood up near the side of the room. She looked nervous but determined, her hands trembling slightly as she raised them to quiet the crowd. "I need to say something," she announced, her voice wavering at first but growing stronger. "I've worked in this department for 3 years, and I've seen things that don't sit right with me." The room fell silent again as everyone turned their attention to her. Chief Porter's face went pale, and his lips tightened into a thin line. The officer took a deep breath and continued. "There's been a pattern here, and it's not just about enforcing the law. It's about who gets targeted and who gets a pass. And I can't stay silent about it anymore." Her words sent a ripple through the room. Marcus watched her closely, a mix of admiration and curiosity in his eyes. He hadn't expected this, but he welcomed it. The officer's testimony added a new layer to the conflict, one that couldn't be ignored or brushed aside. She spoke about instances where decisions were made based on bias rather than fairness, where certain individuals were singled out while others were overlooked. By the time she finished, the room was buzzing with energy, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Chief Porter, however, wasn't ready to go down without a fight. "This is outrageous," he barked, his voice sharp and defensive. "I've always acted in the best interests of this community. These accusations are baseless." But the officer didn't back down. "With all due respect, Chief, the evidence says otherwise," she replied, her voice steady despite the pressure. She turned to the crowd, her eyes scanning the faces around her. "If we want things to change, we have to be honest about what's really happening here." The room erupted again, but this time the energy felt different. It wasn't just anger, it was determination. People were no longer just airing their grievances. They were demanding action. Marcus could feel the shift, and he knew the stakes had just been raised. This wasn't just about Alana anymore. It was about an entire community standing up to a system that had failed them. As the meeting stretched into the night, the tension only grew. The town council members exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to regain control of the situation. Meanwhile, Chief Porter's facade began to crumble under the weight of the accusations and the growing pressure from the crowd. But just as it seemed like the night might end in a stalemate, Marcus stepped forward again, his voice cutting through the noise. "This isn't just about one person," he said, his tone calm but firm. "It's about all of us. And if we want real change, we have to demand it together." The crowd quieted, his words hanging in the air. For a moment, it felt like the room was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. But even as the meeting drew to a close, one thing was clear. The fight was far from over. The community was awake now, and there was no going back. As the meeting stretched past midnight, the atmosphere in the town hall was electric. Voices were raised, emotions raw, and the sense of change hanging in the air was undeniable. Chief Porter, who had initially held his ground with a sense of authority, now looked visibly shaken. His face was flushed, and his usual commanding tone had faltered under the mounting pressure. Marcus watched him closely, sensing that the cracks in Porter's facade were beginning to show, but he also knew this wasn't over yet. Just as it seemed the night was winding down with no clear resolution, One of the council members stood and called for quiet. "This has gone far enough," she said, her voice firm but measured. "The people of this town deserve answers, and they deserve accountability. Chief Porter, as an elected official and leader of this community, it's your responsibility to address these concerns. So I'm asking you now, do you deny that bias has played a role in the way your department enforces the law?" The room went silent. All eyes were on Porter, whose jaw clenched tightly. He hesitated, glancing around the room as if searching for support, but even the officers seated in the back avoided his gaze. For a moment, it seemed like he might try to deny everything, to double down on his earlier justifications. But then something unexpected happened. A man in a dark suit entered the room, his presence causing a stir. He walked confidently, his expression unreadable, and handed a folder to the council member who had just spoken. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, his voice calm, yet commanding, "but I believe this might shed some light on the matter." Marcus, Vanessa, and the rest of the room watched in stunned silence as the council member opened the folder and began to read. Her expression shifted, first to confusion and then to something that looked like shock. She handed the folder to the council chair, who quickly skimmed the contents before addressing the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," the chair began, "it appears we have new information regarding Chief Porter's conduct." He turned to Porter, his tone sharp. "Chief, do you have anything to say about these financial records?" The room erupted into whispers, everyone straining to figure out what was going on. Porter's face turned ashen. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Marcus leaned forward, his heart pounding. He hadn't expected this, but whatever was in that folder, it was clear it wasn't good for Porter. The council chair continued, raising his voice to quiet the crowd. "These records show multiple instances of questionable financial transactions linked to the police department's discretionary fund. Funds that were supposed to go toward community programs, including youth initiatives, were instead redirected without proper documentation. Chief Porter, these allegations are serious. How do you respond?" Porter finally found his voice, but it was shaky. "This is a misunderstanding," he stammered. "Those funds were used appropriately. I can explain." But before he could finish, the young officer who had spoken earlier stood again. "With all due respect, Chief, we've all seen the way money moves in this department. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's corruption." Her words hit the room like a thunderclap. The murmurs turned into full-blown outrage as residents voiced their disbelief and anger. Marcus exchanged a glance with Vanessa, both of them realizing the gravity of what had just been revealed. This wasn't just about Alana anymore. It was about systemic failures that went far deeper than anyone had imagined. As the chaos unfolded, Marcus noticed something odd. The man who had delivered the folder, the one who had effectively exposed Porter, was watching everything with a satisfied expression. Marcus's instincts told him there was more to this story, and he couldn't shake the feeling that this man had his own agenda. Who was he, and why had he chosen this moment to act? Before Marcus could dwell on it further, the council chair called for order. "Enough," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "We will investigate these allegations thoroughly. In the meantime, Chief Porter, I'm placing you on administrative leave effective immediately." The room erupted again, this time with cheers and applause. Alana looked up at her dad, her eyes wide with relief and disbelief. "Did we win?" she whispered. Marcus smiled, squeezing her hand. "We're getting there," he said. But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. As people began to file out of the town hall, Marcus approached the man in the suit. "Excuse me," he said, his tone polite but firm. "I appreciate what you did tonight, but I have to ask, why now? And who are you?" The man smiled faintly, his eyes sharp. "Let's just say I have an interest in seeing justice served," he replied cryptically. "As for who I am, let's just call me someone who's been watching for a long time." Marcus frowned, not satisfied with the answer. But before he could press further, the man added, "You did a good thing tonight, Mr. James. But be careful. When people like Porter fall, they don't always go quietly." With that, the man turned and walked away, leaving Marcus with more questions than answers. Back at home, the family sat together, processing everything that had happened. Alana was visibly lighter, the weight of the past few weeks finally lifting. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to come. The revelations about Porter's corruption had opened a door, and behind it was a world of hidden truths waiting to be uncovered. The next morning, Marcus's phone buzzed with a notification. A news alert popped up on the screen, and his stomach dropped as he read the headline. Chief Porter claims he's being set up, vows to expose the real villains. Marcus stared at the screen, a sinking feeling settling in his chest. Whatever was coming next, he knew it wasn't going to be simple. The morning air was crisp as Marcus sat on his front porch, sipping his coffee and staring out at the quiet street. The events of the past few days felt surreal, like a whirlwind he was still trying to process. Alana sat next to him, her notebook open on her lap as she sketched. Her lemonade stand plans were already back in full swing, a testament to her resilience and determination. The news of Chief Porter's suspension had sent shockwaves through the community. Social media buzzed with reactions, some expressing relief, others disbelief, and a handful rallying in defense of the chief. But Marcus knew the truth was out there now, and no amount of spin or deflection could undo that. The town had seen too much, and people were asking questions they'd never dared to before. Later that day, Marcus received a call from Vanessa. She had just left a meeting with the town council, where new measures were being discussed to ensure accountability in the police department. "They're actually listening," Vanessa said, her voice a mix of surprise and hope. "It feels like change is really possible." Marcus smiled, though a part of him remained cautious. Change was never easy, and he knew there would be resistance. Still, the thought of a better future for Alana and other kids in the community gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. A few days later, Marcus received another unexpected call, this time from the young officer who had spoken out at the town hall. "Hi, Mr. James," she began, her voice hesitant. "I just wanted to thank you. What you did gave me the courage to finally speak up." "Thank you," Marcus replied, humbled by her words. "But I think you're the real hero here. It couldn't have been easy to do what you did." "It wasn't," she admitted, "but it felt right. And there's something else I wanted to share with you. I've been going through department records, and I found more evidence of misuse of funds. I've already handed it over to the council." Marcus felt a wave of gratitude and pride. Her bravery was a reminder that even within a flawed system, there are good people willing to stand up for what was right. "You're making a real difference," he said. "Thank you." As the days turned into weeks, the town began to heal. Community meetings became more frequent, with residents coming together to discuss ways to improve oversight and ensure fairness in law enforcement. The council announced the formation of a civilian review board, a step that many saw as a direct result of Marcus's advocacy. Alana's story had sparked something bigger than anyone had anticipated. Meanwhile, Chief Porter's situation grew more precarious. Investigations revealed a pattern of questionable practices that extended far beyond the financial mismanagement initially uncovered. His attempts to paint himself as a victim only deepened the public's mistrust, and soon, even his staunchest supporters began to distance themselves. By the time the council officially terminated his position, it felt less like a victory and more like a necessary step toward justice. One evening, as Marcus and Alana prepared to set up her lemonade stand in the park, this time with full permits and the town's blessing, Marcus noticed a familiar figure approaching. It was the man in the suit, the one who had delivered the damning evidence at the town hall. Marcus tensed, unsure of what to expect, but the man raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "Relax," he said with a faint smile. "I'm not here to stir up trouble." "Then why are you here?" Marcus asked, his tone guarded. The man shrugged. "Let's just say I like to check in on stories I've had a hand in shaping." Marcus frowned. "Who are you, really? Why did you step in when you did?" The man hesitated, as if weighing how much to reveal. "I'm someone who believes in accountability," he said finally. "Sometimes that means stepping in when others can't or won't. You did the hard part, Marcus. I just gave things a little push." Marcus didn't know whether to trust him, but he decided to let it go. "Well, whatever your reasons, thanks," he said. "But next time, maybe don't be so cryptic." The man chuckled. "Fair enough. Good luck, Marcus. You and your daughter have a bright future ahead." With that, He turned and walked away, leaving Marcus with more questions than answers. But as Alana tugged on his sleeve, eager to start selling her lemonade, Marcus decided to focus on the present. They had come a long way, and there was still work to be done, but for the first time in weeks, the future felt hopeful. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the park buzzed with activity, Alana's lemonade stand became the center of attention. Neighbors stopped by to buy a cup, many of them offering words of encouragement and support. Marcus watched his daughter interact with customers, her confidence shining through, and felt a deep sense of pride. She had been through so much, yet here she was smiling and thriving. Later that night, as they packed up and headed home, Marcus reflected on everything that had happened. The journey had been exhausting, filled with moments of doubt and fear, but it had also been transformative. It had brought the community together, sparked meaningful conversations, and shown that even in the face of adversity, change was possible. Sitting on the porch with Alana, Marcus looked up at the stars and took a deep breath. "You know," he said, "I think this is just the beginning. There's so much more we can do." Alana nodded, her eyes bright with determination. "And I want to help," she said. "I want to make sure no one else has to go through what we did." Marcus smiled, pulling her close. "I think you're going to change the world, kiddo." As the night settled around them, Marcus felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they were ready to face it together. And that, he realized, was what mattered most.